What happens when you take the perfect level design and the mechanics from the 2D Super Mario games and slap it on a Nintendo 64? That's right, fucker, you create God! Super Mario 64 is a game that to this day is highly praised for perfectly translating Mario's old 2D roots and slapping a third dimension on it, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, if you haven't played Peach's Secret Slide by now. What are you doing with your life? Now, there's a lot of complicated steps that a development team has to go through in order to turn this into this. But at least for this video, all you need to know is that they took the good parts of the original games, such as fun platforming, vibrant environments, and goofy and fun characters. But it also gives it things that the SNES and NES couldn't give the franchise before now, such as multiple objectives in one stage, more interesting and freeing character controls, and of course, a more expansive world. Just close your eyes and try to imagine any of those three things in a 2D environment. That's a trick question, it's not physically possible. While a 2D set path is fun, it just feels like obstacles are being thrown at you. Enemy comes, you kill him, and move on to the next one. But in a 3D game, there's none of that jazz. The game presents you with the destination, and you use the environments to get to that destination, instead of just platform, jump, oh hey cool, the flagpole. But the thing about Super Mario 64 is that as well as translating the old 2D games into a 3D environment, it also throws some original elements into the mix. Like the coins, for example. In all the previous games, the coins had a vertical dash in the middle of the face. Now, Super Mario 64 changes it to a star design to sort of fit with the star aesthetic of the game. Also, look at the face of the Thwomp. This was the face of the Thwomp in Super Mario World. Now look at the face of the Thwomp in Super Mario 64. Oh shit! And none of these changes are bad per se, they're just different to what we know. Except for the deformed Thwomps. What the fuck were Nintendo thinking when they made them? Mr. Miyamoto, the final draft for Super Mario 64 is finished. Is there any last minute changes you want before we ship out the games? Yeah, the Thwomps don't look fucking brain dead enough. And deformed Thwomps aside, none of these changes are necessarily bad. If the games weren't willing to take a step forward, then games would never evolve full stop. And instead of just making a 3D Mario game, they try to add new things to the game. Make its own game, its own style, apart from the rest of the franchise. And that was a bold move, because they could have just pulled a Kirby 64 and made another 2D game with 16-bit polygons. But no, they tried making something new and original, and I can appreciate and respect that. Super Mario 3D Land comes in and takes a whole diarrhea dump on that. While the mentality behind Super Mario 64 was take the original source material, make a 3D game whilst expanding the gameplay and world of the franchise. The mentality behind 3D Land was, okay, take the old games, give it a Z-axis. It was basically the mentality behind Kirby 64, except this time on a bulky-ass 3DS. While Super Mario 64 tried to take the franchise forward and evolve the formula, Super Mario 3D Land just feels more of a direct successor to the original Mario games.
New Super Mario Bros., that doesn't count, we're not talking about that today.
Now, does this mean by that fact alone that 3D Land is better than 64? No, hell no, of course not. But does that also mean that 64 is necessarily better than 3D Land? Not necessarily either, no. You see, each game takes the 2D formula and does something different with it. While as we previously established that 64 took the formula and evolved it with its own style, 3D Land takes the source materials and tries to make a game that directly captures the old game's style and charm, whilst also flexing the 3DS's muscles, with elements from the newer games as well, if you like them. And as janky as that might seem, it actually turns out quite well. It truly feels like if 90s Nintendo was suddenly given the technology of the 3DS, this is what they'd make. 90s cultures aside. And many of the old assets that Mario 64 tried to move away from are all here, back in action. You remember the star coins from 64? Well, I don't! What about the wing cap? I thought that was pretty cool. I never heard of it! What about those, weird swamp things?
It never happened.
But to accommodate the lack of assets from 64, 3D Land takes all the assets from the original trilogy and cranks that all the way up to 11. The question boxes are back, the Tanuki suit is back, the weird plastic platforms are back. Why are they back? I don't know, screw you, that's why. I shouldn't give 3D Land too much credit for this since there were hints of this in the new Super Mario Bros. Series, so it's not like 3D Land was the first to do this. Now, all that aside, I'm sure there are a lot of things that 3D Land does that I'm not giving it enough credit for. The parts where it makes use of the 3D slider, the alternating paths, and if I ever decide to make a video on this game, I'd be happy to get into it. But for the most part, the game feels like if you took away Mario's Z-axis movement and changed the camera to a face-on view, it would pretty much play the same as the 2D Mario game. But as well as the gameplay difference, the Nintendo 64 didn't have the processing power to create high polygon models as you would do in games today. This means that even though it was a huge step forward for technology and gameplay, a lot of the charm and aesthetics had to be sacrificed. And by no fault of Nintendo, it was just the fault of the hardware. Which was created by Nintendo, so I don't know. You can talk about this in the comments. I won't read them, but you can still talk about them. As well as the fabled Thwomp example. No, I refuse to look back at it. Look at the Goomba. First, a cute mushroom thing.
Then a turd with a face.
And then back to cute mushroom thing. Still not convinced? Okay, fair enough. Just look at Mario then. Now, obviously, Nintendo tried to make him look his best for the 64. And that's fine, and I can understand that. But it just looks different. In fact, there's no other way to put it. As good as Mario 64 is, aesthetic-wise, it's just different. I mean, think of games like Mario Sunshine, Galaxy, Odyssey, and then compare it to this model. It doesn't look the same, does it? And the next generation of consoles on the GameCube completely fixed this problem. Heck, just look at it next to the other games on 3D All-Stars. Also, yes, I'm still flexing that I own 3D All-Stars. I have it, and you can't get it anymore. So, this is obvious where 3D Land comes in to take the cake. At least for this area. It's much more comforting and relaxed in terms of visuals compared to the roughness and edginess of the Nintendo 64. Not that edginess! If you really want to know what it would be like to combine the two, the gameplay and magic of 64 combined with the aesthetics of the newer games, Super Mario 64 DS was released in 2004, and giant pixels aside, it showed basically that everything the original game was trying to be. It was glorious. It added all the aesthetics from the newer Mario games that we all know and love, but kept the things that made Mario 64 magical. And except for the fact that the Swamp Boss fight was the same, jeez, what were they thinking? It was glorious. So the question still lies. Which game is better, 64 or 3D Land? Well, in my opinion at least, I can say with great confidence that I believe. I don't know, just play the goddamn games. I'm not gonna make decisions for you. That's dumb. You're dumb. This is dumb. I'm gonna go now. See you in a month or so to talk about Doom or something. I don't know. Also, don't hold me to that Doom thing.